And like we do with our sort of roundtable episodes, we take our pick of stories across video games that are interesting to us, and just see what everyone thinks. So I'm gonna throw out some topics and just see what people think of them. And I'm going to start with the next generation, specifically the PS5 reveal event. So did everyone watch the event live? Did anyone miss it or had to catch up on it later?
I watched it later, but I did watch the whole thing through.
Okay. All right. So then, yeah. So as you know, PlayStation have finally revealed their next generation game console, titled, as you might expect, the PlayStation 5. So we got to see a whole bunch of games and console itself. So I want to start by just looking at the event, so like the production of the event, because obviously we're in this time where something would have been said at E3, and with E3 being cancelled, sort of companies are having to adapt and show their games as part of this Summer Game Fest thing that's happening right now. So in terms of the actual event itself, what did you all think of it? So Bex, look back at it, what did you think about the event itself and how they printed the next generation console?
I think that it was really, really business-like, the way they presented it. Like, they didn't seem to take into account that there was not a room full of people being hyped. They didn't really bring any hype to it. That was all very straight-faced, business-like. To me, it felt like they were talking to their investors more than they were talking to their fans. And I think they needed to take into account a bit more that everyone's behind a screen in separate rooms and bring just a bit more hype to it. This is a massive, important thing. There are thousands and thousands of people watching from their different screens. So although there was loads of awesome stuff in it, I kind of was watching them going like, they don't look that excited. And yeah, I feel that quite often with these things, is they're so business-like in their presentation of them that it often is the crowd bringing the hype. And without a crowd, they kind of needed to make it a little bit more fun on their end. But it was still, awesome to see all of the new stuff and get the reveal.
Okay, that's an interesting point about the start of the presentation. What did everyone else think?
Yeah, I do agree that there's nothing like a live audience when Sony's presenting like a new console or something. But given the situation we're in, I think it was what they did was pretty good compared to other streams that we've seen. Because I recall in the Microsoft one, they were basically just in a Zoom chat, and there wasn't like much production value behind it. Like, it's just developers talking in Zoom and stuff like that. So at least Sony put in the effort to kind of make it feel professional. They had like their own graphics. They had the PS5 interface in there, like the UI and stuff. And then they had all those fancy graphics in the build up to actually showing the console. So I think they did a good job production wise.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And as someone I wasn't personally covering it because it wasn't sort of my shift, but as someone who had to pay attention in a professional capacity for the entire thing, it was nice not having a crowd. My God, does a crowd get a little bit annoying when you're trying to watch E3 and it's just sometimes fans just screaming over the announcements when you're just trying to focus on what's being said in front of you. But I think they did as good of a job as I could have expected without sort of a live hype. I mean, as someone who's played PS5 for a really long time, there was enough there that I didn't feel like I needed anyone to hype me up, because I was there in my bedroom screaming as a Ratchet and Clank appear on the screen, But yeah, I don't know. I think it was very professional, but I think that's what Sony's sort of capacity is, especially as they're sort of a Japanese brand. I think that sort of appeals to them a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it did. I get your point, Bex, about just it was delivered very straight faced, and yeah, thinking like for me, I guess I appreciate that because, or at least what I appreciate is they go to the games, and that tends to be what Sony do. You know, when they were at E3 and their conference will come around and they just show game after game after game and just get to the point. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was relentless with just here is every game bit of game footage you would want. So definitely from that regard, so they delivered.
They give the people what they want.
Yeah, maybe I'm just being too critical, and actually everyone just wanted the people to stop talking as quick as possible and go back to the trailers.
But I'm thinking like, what would it look like if the companies did bring a bit more hype? And I guess would you consider like, is there anyone do you seen with this sort of current generation or previous E3 that has brought, you know, an adequate level of hype for you?
I think quite often they rely on the atmosphere they're in and the kind of like the bouncing back off the crowd and not. And I do respect the idea that, having it without all of that shouting is very, very useful for reporters and things. It's almost like they need to put like a feed up online that's like clean audio just coming off the mics and also have something with the audience of people as well. Because like I love seeing all the trailers and all of the, they did have some lovely stings and graphics and stuff going on there. But I don't know, I guess it's partly because of, the international audience and trying to make sure it's as concise and functional for every country it's getting broadcast to. But I don't know. I kind of like, to me, it's like, it's games. I wanted it to be a little bit more like a celebration. Somebody smile. But I don't know. Like, I think that maybe it's just me.
No, I'm not. I'm not mad at that. I think that's something they could. I don't know if they will consider future, what they could do and just bring that energy. As you were
having a compare to kind of lead it through and say, just bring that energy. Then the professional people could stay professional. Obviously the CEO has to present a certain level of professionality and things like that. But having somebody comparing maybe and leading through, I think could just make it, especially when it's online and you don't have the crowd around you, could make it more hype. But I guess at this point in time, most gaming fans are just chomping at the bit for the information. But maybe they're all bouncing around their rooms in excitement. And I'm just, I don't know, just too goth, just sitting there in my dark clothing, putting extra eyeliner on.
Okay, well, I guess, like you say, everyone's kind of just waiting for them to get to the games, because obviously that's kind of what people wanted to see. So did anyone have any particular standout games? I know for me, the first thing that I just loved to see was Spider-Man. I loved the first game, and you could have shown one game and I'd be sold. So I was bored within 5 minutes. But there were a few games that, kind of stood out to me. One of them was Ratchet and Clank, and I've not played many of the games in the series, but this one stood out to me because it kind of showed what I think Sony had been talking about with the whole SSD technology and sort of be able to, be done with load times and all that stuff. And you saw that the way they were able to, like, in game, completely jump from dimension to dimension instantly, and from a technical perspective, because I'm sort of former software engineer, and so like when I see things and I'm like, oh, how is that actually working? And for them to be like loading completely different assets and just jumping from world to world was really cool. And I think it was the first sign of what is possible in terms of like the next gen. And what about everyone else? What did you think of Ratchet and Clank, or
can I just say that can we re-record my bit from earlier, because I completely forgot I saw that trailer and I instantly just went and started Ratchet and Clank from the beginning again, because I love Ratchet and Clank so much. And I was like, I don't need a PS5. I'm not going to get one. And then as soon as I saw that trailer, I was like, well, I better start saving then.
Oh, wow.
I said to myself, I love Ratchet and Clank so much. I think there's 14, maybe more games in the series. And I said to myself, if I can replay them all, I will allow myself to buy the PS5 so I can play the new one.
Wait, no, you're not going to play the one on the PSP.
Oh, no. Well, I've got them on PS2. I literally had them on PSP, and they was just so, I never finished either of them because they were so difficult and just so badly optimized.
Yeah, I mean, I'm similarly in love with Ratchet and Clank. Ratchet and Clank was my first console game, the first game that I ever owned, really.
Oh,
And so yeah, it's like Ratchet and Clank has a soft place in my heart. And I think previously the names of the games were always sort of like a little bit euphemismy and a little bit jokey. Like Up Your Arsenal is one of the names of the games from like years ago. And I think it slowly pivoted away from sort of like that jokiness to being a little bit more child friendly in in sort of the PS4 era. But I think what I do really like is that it was what is really considered a kids game that was really showing the audience and us as sort of like the technicalities of what is possible with the PS5. It was really insane. It was like sort of I had this moment of, oh my god, I wish I was a kid now. This looks beautiful. The actual ability of the PS5 is being shown off with Ratchet and Clank, and that's wild to me. That's wild.
Yeah, but then you say like you wish you were a kid, but then you get the appreciation of seeing where it's come from to now. Whereas, if you're a kid now and this is your first game, you might appreciate the fact that, how much progress has been made.
True. I mean, there is that, but I mean, eventually, how much is that worth compared to such high quality gaming your entire life?
Fair point.
Like, I wasn't alive in the 80s, and I can see gaming then, and I'm like, ugh, that's not my place. But yeah, I'm in complete agreement with Ratchet and Clank being a big highlight. Miles Morales, Spider-Man was sort of a highlight, but then it got tarnished a little bit in the coming days when people were, when Sony, or it was started to be reported that that it wasn't a full game, it was DLC, and then Sony came back saying no, it's sort of a bit like what is it, Lost Legacy, like Uncharted Lost Legacy was to Uncharted 4. It's sort of a whole game in and of itself, but you can buy it by itself, but it's not like a full game. It's not massive.
Yeah, no, I get that. I kind of expected that one, sort of just because of the time between the games. So I think just like logically, as I was looking, I was like, there's no way they've got a completely entire like full game in that space. I only recently finished the last one. There's no way you just like developed a whole another game. I kind of had my expectations about there. But if it's a solid like gaming experience for a good number of hours, then I'm good with that.
Yeah, I think as long as it's a sensible price point for the fact it isn't a full new development, then I think that's fine. And
that too.
Miles is a very beloved, popular, upcoming character, and hopefully, if that game does well, then maybe we'll see more stuff from him in future. I'd like to see like a Spider-Verse game where you just pull everyone in. You could build it off the same engine and just bring in like all the different versions of the spider people at this point. In fact, they're not all people, are
they? No, you're forgetting Spider Pig.
Yeah. Spider beings brought into the same thing. That could be awesome. Like, I think that hopefully that will pave the way for us seeing a lot more of those characters given a platform. Ratchet and Clank wise, I've never played Ratchet and Clank. Wow. None of them. So I've missed, like, it looked beautiful, and from a technical perspective, seeing that and going like, that's just some pre-rendered scenes, and people were like, no, that's actual load leveling, like, they're leveling in, loading the levels, and I was like, okay, that's a little bit impressive. That's a bit like at the point where technology becomes like magic. So I was impressed by it, but I don't have the same kind of emotional response to it because I am a child of the 80s. So Ratchet and Clank wasn't my childhood. Sonic 1 was my childhood. So I don't have quite the emotional kind of response to it, I guess. I think the standout ones for me were things like, I really like Stray. For one.
the cat game.
Yeah, that speaks to me on so many levels. It's a cyberpunk future. It looks amazing. There's robots everywhere, and you're a cat. So that
did she show cat gameplay?
So I don't think they've shown cat gameplay, but that game has been in development quite a long time, as far as I'm aware.
I think it's going to be multi-platform as well, that one. But it was nice to see it in there.
I love the idea of that game, like just exploring the world as a cat. I
love the fact that the PS5 launch event, there was a game where you wander around as a delivery cat. I thought that was amazing. I'm also quite highly sold on the Destruction All-Stars game, which is like a crazy destruction derby. It reminds me of a game which I think was just called Destruction Derby.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Is that just a continuation?
Well, you can. It's called Destruction All Stars, but you can also get out the car and run around in it. So it's like a whole extra level of stuff because you're going to be running around while everyone's in their cars, and you can be just a person running around. And that, as a multiplayer thing, that has me utterly sold because it just made me have that for me was just like just made me think of Destruction Derby and all the fun I had playing that game. And I just looked at it and I was like, that is pure unadulterated enjoyment and zero common sense, which is right up my alley.
Yeah.
I think the big highlight for me was probably Deathloop.
Which is, for sure.
Yeah, the 70s-esque game that's coming out from Arcane Studios, the same guys that made Dishonored 1 and 2. Yeah. So it's sort of more, from the way that it was presented, looks more like a run and gun version of the Dishonored series. I didn't like Dishonored 1. I could tell it was a great game, but it just didn't appeal to me personally. And part of that reason was that I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to get it perfect. Because during that game, not really spoilers for a game that came out in 2011, but as you go, there's sort of a good ending and bad ending, depending on how many people you kill and how stealthy you are versus how sort of like sort of loud and proud and how many people you kill, right? And so with Deathloop, it looks like it's that game, but with that turned off. And it's also the only game I could think of, and I tweeted about this, and there were a lot of people that agreed with me, where the protagonist and antagonist are both black in any game I can think of.
And there's a trivia question, easy one, but a trivia question nonetheless.
It's interesting. It's an interesting concept. I mean, and it's also where the characters just so happen to be black, and it's not their race isn't about anything. It's just they're black. Yeah, they're the characters. And that,
I do appreciate really that because it's kind of like there doesn't have to be a reason for them to be. They can just be black and then get on with the game.
Yeah.
So
that's one of the things that I really look for in games where blackness isn't a character trait. It's just someone can be black and it sort of just be part of, I mean, it could be part of the story, but it's not a stereotype, and it's not like, again, within like the 90s, there was, there were like very like various Mr. T sort of rip-offs in games and stuff like that. Or like the first games that really highlighted black people were only those with major amounts of violence in them, due to them being actually fighters of the time that were in sort of wrestling or boxing. So, I mean, it does show that there's sort of like a shift away from stereotyping within games, which I'm very down for, and Deathloop looked really good gameplay-wise too.
Yeah. Okay. There was a few other games that kind of stood out to me. One in particular, not necessarily because I think I'd be interested in this game, although kind of we'll see. But there's a game called I think Goodbye Volcano High. And
oh yeah, the one that looks a bit like a Flash animated cartoon.
Yeah, and it stood out just because its visual appeal. It kind of made me think to a wider point. What I liked about the presentation was that there was a variety of visual styles in amongst the games, so you weren't seeing the same types of games. You're seeing like many different styles and different sort of mechanics. And this one stood out because it looked like you were playing a story essentially, and the visual style was kind of sort of a hand-drawn thing going
kind of playing a comic book kind of thing. The other one visually that I really liked was Solar Ash, that's slated for 2021, which had that sort of very stylized, blocky graphics and wasn't going for realism at all. And I thought that looked really, really gorgeous graphically as well, just in its use of like flat color and simplicity and stylization as well. So that was another one, because I think there's a tendency when you have the level of hardware we're at now, the level of ability to put in every single stray hair, every freckle, everything. And in some ways that's wonderful. But I feel that sometimes game developers feel like that's what you have to do with your game. So whenever I see something that's gone completely the other way and it says, I want to use all that power, but I want to make something that's far more abstract and comes at the graphical, like a much more sort of graphic, blocky, or just different approach, that really appeals to me, because sometimes those photorealistic movie style graphics, they work really well. You know, you look at stuff like, you know, the Horizon Zero Dawn series and also what was the other one by Square, Project Athena?
Project Athia.
Yeah, that looks beautiful in a realistic style, but seeing they were also presenting stuff that was very cartoony or was just straight up abstract, like the Sailor Ash one, I thought was really cool as well. And that gets me more interested in it, because then I can see they're still very open to having a wider creative kind of diversity in style as well, not just everything trying to look like a movie.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's why, sort of going back to Ratchet and Clank and the SSD and why I quite like that focus. And even though, you know, we saw one example, but I'm sure there are many other ways that can change games. And I'm interested in that sort of all more than sort of the visual, because you expect the visual bump and the frame rates and whatever. But I'm interested in how you can make different types of games, or you can completely change the dynamic of the games you play. And I think that, combined with seeing sort of different visual styles, just made me interested in what can come on the PS5 or just next gen in general. But I saw it on the PlayStation reveal.
It was interesting. They had the Oddworld Soulstorm as well, still being like a 2D platformer, but just gorgeous. Because like
retro.
Yeah, as someone who's, you know, born in 82 and grew up on 2D, it's quite nice to see there's still a place for that style of game as well, just using the power to make it look absolutely phenomenally stunning. And I wasn't expecting another Oddworld game. I must have missed the post-it note sent around the office on that one, because I didn't know that was going to be in the mix, let alone as like in the big reveal to have an Oddworld game, because the first one especially I absolutely loved.
No, and that took me by surprise. So it took a moment for me to remember, like, oh wow, this was a franchise way back when, and so that was definitely impressive. So I think there were, you know, there's, like I said, there was a lot that was shown, and I guess the thing that everyone was waiting for is to finally see the actual console, which for the moment I thought weren't going to show, and then they did. They dedicated sort of the last moments of it to showing the actual hardware. I pretty much got two questions: is what did you think of the design, and what do you think the price will be? Because they did not show or mention pricing. So anyone want to jump in on either of those?
I don't know. I've never really cared too much about what consoles look like. I don't know. I've never understood. People have this real fixation on what the consoles are going to look like, and I've never really taken much notice of it. I quite like it, actually. I think I prefer to have. I mean, I think the big thing with it is that it's massive. It's huge. You need some space to put a PS5 now that we realize. But also, I sort of prefer it to look like something rather than the next Xbox, which sort of just looks like a toaster. Just sat on your shelf.
Got less features than a toaster.
Yeah, probably. It can't even make my breads tastier. So yeah, I have never felt too much of that conversation about what it looks like. I've just never really cared too much. But I don't know if that's just me, or I've always cared more about what it can do than what it looks like.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. I like that they've sort of gone out and, you know, made a bold style choice, and I appreciate that. But like you say, you'll get it, you'll put it somewhere, and then you'll spend more time looking at the screen when you're playing it. So it doesn't matter too much, except for the memes that came out after the
it looks like a router.
Yeah, it does look like a router. I'll give people that. It does look a bit like a router.
Yeah, it looks like a Skybox had an illicit love child with a Wi-Fi router and then put bunny ears on it. That's what it looks like.
That's one of the best descriptions I've ever.
Thank you. I'm from a graphic design and product design background, so I had a lot to say on this, because I kind of just looked at it and I was like, I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that color scheme. I wasn't expecting it to have tiny little ears. That it looks like, those the headphones with the cat ears that light up.
Yeah.
It looks like that all the streamers wear them. It just looks like, a Skybox and a Wi-Fi router had a teenage child and it's wearing those headphones. And I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm just saying that's exactly what it looks like.
I did this color scheme.
They're doing an alternate color scheme, a darker one as well, I believe. Or is that just a rumor?
I don't know if that's confirmed. I don't know if that's confirmed.
It's not confirmed, but I think they will.
I can never tell what's just people's memes and Photoshop and what isn't now, because we've got to that point of there were so many memes, it was hard to discern the actual information from anything else. But I think, I don't know, they put a lot of effort into the design. It's very expensive looking, and I'm assuming the price is gonna reflect how expensive it looks. I much prefer my consoles to lie down, not look like they need to stand up, because it's better for the disk drives. Anything with a physical disk drive, it's better for it. And I think it's going to be awkward to put on a shelf, that one. So even though they've put a lot more effort in than Xbox, that literally just drew a rectangle and then went home, I think I prefer the Xbox design, because I can imagine with that Xbox, you're going to get a million different skins and custom versions, loads of artwork on it, which is one of the things I like. I like custom consoles. I have a Gears of War 3, Xbox 360 and controller. And I sort of looked at that PlayStation one and I was like, good luck making any themed customs or limited edition versions of that, because it's covered in curves and lights, and it's already got its bunny ears. A Pikachu one probably is the only thing you could do with it, which you obviously wouldn't really be allowed to do. And I think despite the fact it contains no design whatsoever, I prefer the Xbox, just because I'm going to be able to cover it in stickers and I can put it however I want it.
Yeah, that's my thing with the PlayStation 5. I actually don't mind the design itself that much, but I'm just thinking about the practicability of it and like where I'm gonna put it. And the thing is, like, you have to have like an actual stand just to lie it flat, and like that's a big deal, because it's like it's gonna take up a lot more space, and the console looks big enough as it is. So
it's huge. It looks like it ate all the other consoles.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, my biggest concerns are, how big it is and where I'm actually going to fit it. And the overall logistics of the console, and whether like it's got good heating, like cooling and stuff like that. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, and I think just by making it a box, the Xbox is, it's literally Xbox is now a box, and they've pretty much accepted what they're giving us is a small PC with a green light on it, which is kind of fine by me, because it's going to be so much easier to store as well as personalize and decorate. And that when you see the picture of the PlayStation 5 next to like an existing PlayStation, you're like, okay, either I'm going to look like a pixie or that thing is a giant.
That's going to be interesting to see. And I definitely hear you, like, Microsoft have kind of in a way accepted that they are just like making a different PC, and it's a box, just take it. So I mean, speaking of accepting things, I feel like for me, and this is my assumption I made when seeing the reveal of 2 different console SKUs, that it was an admission that this is going to be an expensive console, and they know it. And I think the digital only is there to give Sony the claim that our console starts from, let's say, $499, but one with the disc is $599, whether it's dollars or pounds. I don't know how they're going to wait, but I think they're going to be an expensive console.
Yeah, I think so too, because I'm thinking about it from the perspective of a PC builder. So like the fact that they're putting so much emphasis on the SSD technology, and it also has like its own unique audio technology as well. All of that costs a lot of money, like especially the SSD. So I think like if you're gonna get the PS5 that has like the most capacity, I think it's going to be close to like £600, like £599 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think so. Look historically at like PlayStation. It's like, how did they win the console wars? They just walked out and said how much their thing was going to cost, right? And this time they've like very quietly not mentioned it.
Well,
like, it means something.
Neither Microsoft nor PlayStation have really talked about prices.
Yeah, but both of them.
In 2000, what happened with the PS3 was that Sony's was so much more expensive than Microsoft that it lost them that console war. That was the big thing. So I don't know if historically knowing the background of where Sony went wrong in the past, I don't know how expensive it's going to be, because you can a cheap SSD, what costs probably like $100, like a good cheap SSD, right? Or round about that, and it's going to be a higher end SSD if they're trying to achieve what we saw in videos. And it's just, I don't know where they're going to try and cut costs so that one, it does live up to the hype in a lot of ways, but it doesn't far exceed what they think that people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah, that's an interesting balance, because what's in the box is expensive, and to make any kind of money, there's going to be, just from a business perspective, like surely there's going to be a flaw, how you can push that down.
Yeah, also there's been some increasing on price on stuff recently with everything that's going on in the world currently, sourcing stuff and getting stuff made. These things have been increasing in prices. They are very high in demand. And I have read rumors, although they are unsubstantiated, that they were having some issues getting stuff at the costs that they originally wanted to, and that was also pushing the price up as well. And like maybe they don't quite know exactly what they're going to be able to sell it for based on, do they go on the prices that components are costing them now, or do they go on what they might cost them if things go back to normal? But again, I don't know if that's true or not, but I could see that could definitely be a factor. And I don't know as well, like how big the hard drives are going to have to be on, like if you're going to have a digital only one with the size of the games, you're not talking about a cheap SSD. You're going to have to go for the largest one of a very reliable quality that has the fastest loading times to do what they're doing. So I'm expecting it to be the more expensive of the two.
Yeah, no, that's what I think, sort of, as I was saying, like the reason why they've got the two SKUs is to at least, they can say, it starts from, so they can advertise a lower price. So it'll be interesting to see. And I mean, so saw the PlayStation sort of response to Xbox. So I just wanted to touch on the other consoles in this next generation race, being like, say, Xbox. Do you feel, does this change anything for Xbox? Because I think we're seeing more and more, it starts from the visual design, and also in terms of their approach to games, that Microsoft and Sony are going in quite different directions. I feel Xbox are, leveraging the desktop operating system they have, and the whole idea of Game Pass and smart delivery. So it's about, you buy a game and you can play it wherever, whereas Sony feels like they're doubling down on, the console experience. Although they might have a service that they just haven't announced yet. So how do you think this changed anything for Microsoft? Because they've got an event coming up in July. Do they need to do anything in particular now, given what Sony have shown?
I think if you are going to buy a console, there is a really good reason to buy a PlayStation over an Xbox now. And I think Game Pass is that reason. It's sort of a little bit shooting Microsoft, like themselves in the foot a little bit. in my opinion, because you can sort of get what would be an Xbox exclusive on a PC now. And so if you have a decent enough PC, you don't really need an Xbox to have an Xbox experience like a bunch of the time. And Xbox as it is don't have many exclusives that people are sort of going after. There's Halo and there's Gears, and that's
Forza,
sort of,
I guess.
There's Forza. There is Forza as well. But when it comes to thinking about what Sony has, like Sony's just having a massive success with The Last of Us Part 2. They've got the Spider-Man games. They've got Death Stranding. They've got Ratchet and Clank. I mean, I can list far more, like off the top of my head, exclusives that require a console for PlayStation than I can for Microsoft anymore, for Xbox anymore.
Yeah, they're kind of pushing the backwards compatibility thing almost, because they're having all the smart delivery stuff and all the games where you're going to be able to have an upgraded version on the Series X and stuff like that. And I think they're almost trying to say to people, hey, you can flog your existing Xbox and buy this one, and all the games you've got are going to look better. So they might not be able to offer you as much new and exclusive stuff, but I think they're trying to sort of edge in the direction of we're the value for money option, rather than the exclusive super hype version. I think that's almost reflected in the designs, being that Xbox is a box and Sony are clearly going for, this is a sleek piece of modern art with bunny ears. So I guess, that might be where they're kind of trying to pitch themselves.
It's not a bad strategy, because so if you're Microsoft, and as long as Xbox isn't like costing you money, because they don't want that, but if they've got people signing up to the subscription service and paying them, actually I don't know what it costs, X amount a month, and that's a reliable income. I guess they're looking to that, and how can we get more people? It's kind of like the Netflix model, where we're reliably expecting this amount a month, and if we can scale that up, leveraging whichever platform that works for them. I don't know what it means for, I guess, the quality of their sort of first-party games, or even the quantity of them. But I feel that's where they're going, which is, I wouldn't say, it might not be for me necessarily, but I wouldn't say it's a bad strategy to take.
Yeah, we're looking at the amount of explosion of like indie games and stuff as well. Like if they're going to be more available on Xbox, that could be another factor that bolsters just the quantity of available games and stuff like that. And if they can win the kind of service model thing and make it a cheaper price to entry, then
I think when it comes
gets
to
two different things.
Indie games, though, I think that if you're going to buy a console for indie games, at the moment it's Switch. They've really got that. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but they've got that really hammered home. They've got that so nailed in that the Switch is a really good place for indie games. And if I'm going to buy an indie game now, it's either going to be on my PC or it's going to be on my Switch. I will never ever think about it for if I did have an Xbox, I wouldn't think about it for Xbox, and I wouldn't think about it for PlayStation either.
Yeah, it's weird because Nintendo used to be quite difficult to get your games onto their platform. They were always so protective, and then with the Switch, they just went, "Nah, everyone," and it just exploded.
And it worked.
And it has completely worked. Yeah.
So then, I guess with the other contenders, the Switch. I think we've got a question coming up on the Switch already, but you've got, them. The one I'm interested in, because I think we said it on the last roundtable where everyone had one or the other, PlayStation or Xbox, but everyone had Switch, and I feel like in a way they're the winners because everyone's got a Switch. Then that that's the first console. The one I'm interested in is actually Stadia. And whether Stadia even make
interested in Stadia? Who says that?
The only person.
So let me qualify. I'm not necessarily interested in. I'm not interested in getting Stadia. I'm just interested in whether that survives to the next generation. From that laugh, I'm guessing no.
I think the model will survive, but I don't know if Stadia itself will still be around. But I think that's where the industry is going. But Stadia, I've heard many different things. They're not supporting publishers. They're not giving them enough money and royalties. and that sort of thing. So that's why their service is kind of stagnant at the moment, because they don't really have, like, there's no incentive for a gamer to subscribe to that service because there's so many other options out there.
Exactly.
But if Microsoft can do what Stadia is trying to do with Games Pass, though, then they could easily lead the way to getting to that Netflix game service type of thing for games.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think Microsoft is well placed to just pick that up, because I was watching trailers for some new indie games and things on the stream the other day, and a Stadia advert came up on a video, and literally the whole of chat went, "Is that still a thing?"
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that's already, people just had assumed it had folded. They didn't even realize it was still an available service. And that kind of gives an idea, just of, obviously it's a fairly small group of people, but everyone pretty much just agreed that they weren't expecting to see an advert for that because they thought that was already done and closed. So I was like, oh yeah, you're not doing well. An audience of gamers thought you'd already crashed and burned. So I think it will be eaten up by other services. I mean, yeah, you've got Game Pass on Nintendo and Game Pass on Xbox. And if you have a similar thing opened up on the Switch, especially with their indie library and stuff, it would be gone in a day, wouldn't it?
I mean, what I think the problem was for Stadia is that, one, it assumed internet connectivity was the level that they would have it where they were developing it. Not true. It was slow for a lot of people in places that weren't as well funded. Then there was a lack of exclusivity. There was no game that you could get on Stadia that you sort of just couldn't really get anywhere else, that people wanted to be playing anywhere else. It was just a calamity, a sort of a release. It's absolutely where I think games will eventually go. Eventually, but I think the infrastructure for internet services needs to be better, and I think that Google needs to spend years having its own developers and publishers working on something behind the scenes that people want to see for the release. Otherwise, it's just not going to. It's never going to take off. And I think that either Google has to sort of like shut it down, come back to it in a good 5 years, or that it's going to be picked up by someone else.
Yeah, and I think as well with the advertising for Stadia, I looked at that advertising and I said, who is their target demographic? Who is this logo? Who is this system actually targeting? What is the message they're trying to get across? And it just seemed like they didn't quite know what they were doing. It felt like it was a beta at the point where it was launching its final product.
Well, that's very Google.
Yeah, they just kind of throw ideas out there and see what sticks because they've got the money and the weight to do it. And I think partly because they've got the money and the weight to do that, nobody assumed the Stadia was going to stick around. And on a service-based model, if they don't think you're going to stick around, what's the point in joining in the first place? Whereas other streaming gaming services, like I use Antstream, which is a streaming gaming service for retro and arcade games. So specifically much older games, which take up a lot lower bandwidth. They've got thousands of these old games that now, because retro is really big, like would cost you an absolute fortune. Plus you'd need tons of hardware, and the arcade games, you'd have to buy an arcade machine to play them. So that, as a very cheap price point as well, that makes sense because you can send those small games over even the smallest bandwidth. Like it works on mobile as well as PC and stuff. And that works because it has a very niche specific target audience. Whereas the Stadia was just like, does anyone want this? Let us know. I guess we'll carry on if you like it.
I'm going to have to get Lau, mayamada co-founder, on a future gaming show because he has been on a previous show saying how he fell out of games, but something like Stadia interested him. And he's actually been trying to get me to try out Stadia for the past couple of months. I haven't done it yet. Sorry, Lau. But I have the same thing as mentioned here. Like, I don't know. I've just got options. I've got so many options. I don't know why I would turn to that one. I think that is the problem that Google have, as well as the reputation for them starting things and having no problems sort of cutting projects and just moving on, which makes it hard to invest in a console service. So I think ultimately I agree we are going in a direction, and every iteration of this kind of feature, I guess, from a sort of wide perspective gets better. So I guess we're moving in that direction, but this doesn't feel like it's it. yet. So yeah, I think it's going to be a tough one for them. We've got a couple of few stories, but before we started recording, there was some breaking news. So concerning the streaming world. Now, at no time do I claim to be any kind of knowledgeable about streaming. So I'm going to hand this news over Imogen, who broke it on our pre-show. So tell us what's happening.
Well, I guess for context, this will come out after everyone knows. But as we were starting this conversation, just before we started recording, it was announced that Mixer is no more. Basically, on the 22nd of July, Mixer will be no more. It will move existing partners over to Facebook Gaming. So Microsoft and Facebook will be coming together to I guess support some of the partnerships that they've already made and not leave them out to dry. However, it does feel very much like they're being hung out to dry at the moment. But basically, Mixer was made 2016 or so, and it has been Microsoft's sort of failing pet project of a live streaming service. And yeah, Twitch won. That's the news.
The bottom line.
Twitch didn't notice Mixer was in the race.
Yeah, no,
I think it's the problem.
Twitch is like the Reddit of internet forums. It
Mm.
looks like a mess. It may not be the best in some of the things it does, but it is so solidly the front runner as a streaming service that there's almost no way to compete with it. I guess Facebook Gaming is now going to try and do that, but it's just there's almost no comparison. There's no question. New streamers are almost always just going to pick Twitch.
So
yeah,
I mean,
it's like there's a bar that everyone really likes, and all your friends are there, and all the new people that come to town go there, and it's a bit of a mess, and it could do with redecorating, and they've kind of just gaffer taped the desks back together and stuff.
Yeah.
But all the people you know are there, and then Mixer's opened up next door, and it tried to be really shiny, but they didn't actually put quite enough money in to make the decor of the bar that much better, and then they wondered why no one was there. That's sort of what it felt like to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm loving these analogies, by the way.
It's a shame that Mixer didn't gain traction, because it's always lovely to have more than one horse in the race, and have alternatives. But yeah, I mean, I started Twitch a year ago, and I didn't really even consider Mixer, which is a shame, because it would have been nice to see it grow, but it just didn't really.
Yeah,
Is this a question of like quality or the just community wasn't there, or both?
I think
was it actually good?
I think there's community. I think there's potential growth as well. Everyone knows that Mixer's numbers aren't huge compared to Twitch. Twitch is a bigger platform, so people are going to see there are more people on Twitch, there are more creators on Twitch. I might go to Twitch because I feel like that's maybe where the community is already based. There are already very successful streaming communities. A lot of the people who are massive on Mixer, or were past tense, were grown on Twitch and then moved as well. So they don't really have that many examples of their sort of like own massive content creators. Yeah, I think it was just Twitch was there. It's always been there, and it's just so huge and it's so successful. And I don't know. I also think. Oh, by the way, like as we are talking, there are Mixer streamers on live right now crying.
Wow,
because they didn't know, which is really horrible. This is very
they didn't give
news.
them a heads up. I feel bad for making jokes now, because that must be really, if they've built large communities and they've been putting that much effort in, they must be horribly upset. Hopefully they will all find a home.
I'm hoping. At the moment, I think Facebook is trying to. I think the big content creators, the ones that were locked in for multiple year contracts, have been released of those contracts, apparently, allegedly. And there are some rumors going around that Ninja, for example, is being offered something like 10 mil right now. He is thinking about it right now as we say these.
Sorry, thinking about what?
He's thinking about it on air.
He's not on air.
Oh,
he made a tweet just now, I think, saying something like, "I have a lot to think about. And I will be thinking about my plans as I make my decision." So
Wow.
obviously Facebook and Twitch are currently battling it out to see who can offer Ninja more money. But yeah, basically a bit of a mess. Everyone knew that Mixer wasn't ever going to be the giant that Twitch is, but I think there were a lot of allegations going around this last weekend that really like seemed like they were the nail in the coffin for the platform.
Yeah, I hope a lot of people can port back over to Twitch or something, and that the communities can come with them, because Facebook gaming not so much, but Twitch is a household name, and it's seen a massive explosion of new streamers and new viewers as everyone is kind of working from home and stuff like that. And hopefully a lot of those Mixer people, their communities will come with them, because for all of the fact that some of this is it's I hope those communities can come with those people and come over to Twitch or wherever they want to be, because for some of the smaller guys that haven't had the sponsorships and the money behind them, if they just found out via a news article and they had no heads up, that must be devastating. I regret my former flippant remarks now. That's not very nice as a business move of those guys.
Well, Mixer has always been the butt of jokes when it comes to live streaming. It's jokes about there are so many people watching it this event on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch, and there are 3 on Mixer. It's always been that joke. There's always been that sort of laughing at how small Mixer is compared to the money that was obviously being pumped into it. And it is a shame. It was nice, at least, I think, people having the option, thinking, I want to live stream, where should I do it? And now it will seem like there's only Facebook gaming or there's Twitch. And a lot of people don't really like Facebook anymore for various reasons.
No, especially the younger crowd aren't really on Facebook at all.
Gen Z, the Zoomers, aren't really attracted to Facebook as a platform. And so then it sort of feels like Twitch is the only place to go. And as I stream on Twitch, I really enjoy streaming on Twitch. But if something happens to it, and I don't know what would, but if there was any real problem with it, it'd be sort of difficult to know where to go after that.
Yeah, well, this is all about the community. So if I'm sure that those Mixer guys and the communities they have there, that will be quite easy for them to hopefully move over to Twitch without losing too much of what they've built up. Because I think the thing about Twitch is that it's also pretty welcoming to new streamers for a lot of it, and the communities there are pretty strong. So I think we should just have a mix of people welcome, come join kind of movement to get those people over to hopefully not feel completely like they're starting over after what must be quite a shock.
Yeah, and I think I'm seeing the consoles where you see what happens when you do have competition. Kind of it forces the companies to think and to not rest on their laurels, and it benefits the community's joy, whatever the product or service is. So it is a shame from that perspective also to have less choice, less I guess opposition to that phrase to Twitch. So that sounds like a shame.
Yeah, maybe it will be a wake-up call to someone like YouTube, who has a live streaming capability, but it's just a kind of basic bolt-on to what they actually do. Maybe they'll see a niche where maybe they want to get all the Mixer guys over to them, and maybe they'll upgrade their live streaming capabilities, because it would make sense for YouTube to be the other horse in that race.
So on more than one occasion, we are asking Google to do better. So
Google, wake up.
Just wake up,
more than ever.
Okay, so kind of I guess back to the games. Just a note to mention with the delay of Cyberpunk 2077 to November. Is one particularly looking out for Cyberpunk? I am, so I'm one. But what do you think about the delay? And what do you think about when I saw it? I don't mind. I know it's been delayed before. There are enough games that I haven't played that I can, is not affected. I was interested to see the reaction from people who have a weird sense of entitlement that the game should come on their schedule.
God.
I don't know if I'm looking at it the wrong way, but Yeah, what do you think about the
If it
delay?
came out broken, they'd be so angry. I'd rather it was delayed,
Yeah.
especially a game. I mean, we've waited approximately 307 years for this game already. I remember the first ever trailer. I've been waiting since the first ever teaser trailer. November's not that long. If that's what it takes to give me a game that's not full of bugs, I'll just wait the extra time. And especially now with everything going on in the world,
Yeah.
I'm expecting delays, and for me, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought. Have you played Deus Ex on the PC, Bex?
Yep.
Oh, Garrett, the original.
Yeah.
Okay, because that when I felt like Deus Ex vibes, and that's one of my favorite games ever. So yeah, I'm ready for Cyberpunk. But like you say, I feel it's kind of you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because like you say, if they bring it out with bugs, people are always ready to complain about something, and I feel people just need to take a step back, put it in perspective. There are plenty of other games in the 2 months that it's been delayed more, and if you get a better game for it, then that can only really be a good thing. So I just wanted to mention that. Another thing I'm very interested in, and particularly for Imogen and Gary, because you're people that have to kind of cover this, and Gary, in your case, you've been to E3, and with E3 being no more, or this year, and in its place we have this Jeff Keighley-led Summer Games Fest, which is unlike E3, which is kind of a single point of focus for the games industry. The Summer Game Fest is a spread out over like 4 months. I think it's going to end in August with a series of online events. So what do you think about this new format? Has it worked for you, or is it working because we're still in it? But is it working? How do you compare it to something like E3 from your perspectives?
Yeah, I think it's great. Like, I think it's a great idea from Jeff Keighley, because I know that he himself was a little frustrated with the direction of E3 in recent times.
Because he did step down from E3 or step away, or just before they cancelled.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's very smart of him to do, because I'm pretty sure a lot of these companies were going to have some sort of stream anyway, since E3 isn't here. So just the fact that he's kind of tied it all together into, one kind of label, I think that's very smart. And it kind of shows that you don't always need to wait for E3 to kind of get these big spectacle announcements. And we can kind of just get them at the publisher's leisure, basically. So I'm kind of liking it. I'm liking all the different streams and stuff. It's a lot more convenient. Obviously, there's no experience like E3, because being there physically is amazing, especially if you really love this business. There's nothing like actually being there, but the companies actually get to save money, and they also don't have to they don't have to rush to get things out at a specific time. Like, they can kind of have the freedom and to do things as they can. So it gives the publishers a lot of control, I guess, and that's a positive in itself. But what do you think, Imogen?
Well, I completely agree. I think there's I think everyone's going towards the Nintendo Direct version of things, where you sort of you take your time to develop whatever you're developing, and then you say, oh, by the way, in 2 days we have this announcement, right? And that has worked really well for Nintendo. You see it trending every time that anyone talks about Nintendo Direct. It's coming, and then they'll have something to show in their own time, and I really like that. However, I think some of gaming is it's so massive, and I think that it might also play against some of the publishers. So like EA Play was pretty I'll be frank, for me it was pretty disappointing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think for a lot of people it was quite disappointing, especially when people were waiting for Dragon Age. It's sort of just been something that people have been waiting for, and they got shown like basically 2 screenshots, and that was it. And then there was the Squadrons thing, which was really good, but no one was really waiting for it. No one was really hyped about it. So EA Play meant that I think with an with an E3 format, you could have EA Play. People could have fallen asleep in the chat, done all sort of their like talking about how it was a disappointment, and then move on immediately to something else and pull that shade, I guess, away from EA and move on to the next thing. And right now, everyone's just still talking about how much of a disappointment EA Play was. And so
they didn't even talk about next gen games, did they?
Yeah, there was no next gen. There was nothing shiny or new except from sort of Squadrons. And I think that's sort of I think that's one of the edges of the sword that this sort of time period has, because it didn't seem like EA was ready to show anything, and it was still expected that they were going to have a big E3 type thing. So I think that if we all just got rid of the idea of E3 altogether, but still did the video thing, I think a lot of publishers would benefit altogether from it. And it would be a shame to get rid of E3, but I think that if now that everyone has had the example of what it could be like without it, I don't know if it'll come back ever as strongly as it used to be.
Yeah, another thing I'll say also is because we're in a year where new consoles are coming out as well. So like the expectations for each of these streams are like huge.
Yeah.
And the EA one definitely wasn't that great. Like I agree. But I feel like now every single stream is going to be judged by the fact that we're in a new console year.
Yeah.
And I think people are going to be like hungry for new news and information, or just to get a look at, you know, something that looks like it has next gen graphics. So the expectations are very high, and that might not be good for certain publishers who are going to hold a stream.
Yeah, and last year I remember people discussing like, oh well, X was a little bit disappointing, but next year's a console year. And it was always like 2019 was the constant turnover of, it's okay that was disappointing because next year is the big year. Next year is when we're going to see it all. Next year is when I expect something. And, you know, like everyone sort of knows that a console year is massive. If you don't have something to show in a console year, it is considered, you know, sort of falling flat on its face.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess because as I've been watching, I haven't watched everything in the Summer Games Fest, but I kind of got to like the whole live stream thing. So I'm quite, even though I haven't been to E3, I'm quite big on like physical meetings and all that. But the one thing I will say for E3 that I'm not sure about with this like online sort of live stream format is with E3, for me, it was the one time in a year where I saw games being covered in the mainstream. And I saw people who don't normally take notice of games take notice of games. And if you know, video games are going to continue to reach out to bring in new people, I feel there has to be some of that. And I'm not sure if the Summer Games Fest is a lot of the industry talk to itself, and I could be completely wrong, but I'm wondering how many people who aren't already into games are tuning in to watch these live streams. Maybe outside of the Sony, because we all know, you know, you can go to the average person in the street and they'll know about, you know, PlayStation as a brand. But I wonder, like, on massive people who aren't already into games are taking much notice of these streams.
I think what's an interesting a point that was sort of being discussed at the moment in regards to The Last of Us Part 2. For example, it's one of the biggest, I think it's the biggest selling game of the PlayStation 4 generation.
Yeah,
right?
I saw that. Yeah.
Something along those lines. And it was a reminder, although there was this massive amount of discourse online in quite the intense gaming sphere, like being inside the gaming sphere, there are millions and millions and millions and millions of people outside of the gaming sphere still consuming games, and just they would go into a shop picking up a game that they go, oh yeah, I played the first one of this years ago, let me play this, and walking away, and that is as much as they engage with games. And I think that I need to like pinch myself and remember frequently that although I am inside the game sphere, not everyone who plays games is. And so when it comes to E3, I think there are a lot of people that might buy games on the regular who don't even know E3 exists, you know, and they aren't aware of anything, or that the way they become aware of it is just, you know, by a Facebook post that IGN posts that's liked by their friends, or they're tagged by one of their friends. Like, hey mate, the next COD, look at this. This is what we're expecting, you know. And so although I think that E3 was a good thing for, you know, the wider gaming sphere, and it's a good place to sort of compile a lot of information, and some of the, you know, some of the big media forums outside of games sort of get their teeth into it. I think there's also it's important to remember that not E3 isn't everything to a lot of gamers because they don't even know it exists. But also, now that we've had the virus and everyone was stuck inside and games became big again, I think in the future, I think massive media outlets are going to be spending more time paying attention to games now they've seen the success they can have, even just talking about them or streaming them rather than live sports, for example.
Yeah, actually, that's a fair point. I think we are in this period where games have been brought to the forefront, and it almost feels weird to say because gaming, you know, is one of the biggest industries. Yeah, it's you know, it's already big, but yeah, to a large section of the population, it's still that kind of, you know, thing that the kids do, or is not a serious thing. So yeah, I think it's been brought to attention that there are actual benefits to games, particularly at a time when, you know, people are spending more time at home, need a way to engage not just kids but, you know, people of all ages. So I mean, do people think that we're still going to have physical events launches this year?
I do. I think physical events will still be around, particularly ones like PAX and Comic-Con and things like that, where it's more of a community experience. But I also think that in the future, esports is going to kind of play a big part in gaming events, because esports is always growing, and I feel like a lot of emphasis is going to go towards esports eventually, like in the future and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think those are going to become like huge.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have rediscovered gaming in the last few months, and they've found it as a way to connect with their friends or with their kids or their parents or whatever it is. And a lot of people have suddenly remembered how fun it was, or discovered it for the first time, or like the amount of people that now are into gaming because of things like Animal Crossing as well. You know, it's all these new audiences are being drawn in, and I'm certainly seeing on Twitch an absolute ton of viewers and people coming in that have just made a Twitch account that week. And it is, I don't know how many of those people will stick when things go back to normal, but we've definitely seen an influx and a lot of more people discovering a love for this as even if it is just as an occasional casual hobby. And I hope we go back to having those kind of big events, whether they'll be in exactly the same format or not, I don't know, but definitely for the community aspects, I'm looking forward to them being back, and I think they will continue. But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it will be. I'm definitely one of those people who've just recently got Twitch account. I think this period is, you know, we have our own gamepad event, which up until now has been a purely physical, and it's been a time where we've been forced to essentially move online, but which I was not resistant, but just wary. I didn't quite understand how we take, you know, an event that had been made for meeting in the real world and building community that way online. But I think we found something we can build on. And what I've learned is that there are pros and cons. So what I've seen with the Summer Games Fest is that it's opened it up to more people, like the new releases and the games where not everyone can go to E3. And same, you know, I hope with our event, it kind of opens up to new people that, you know, can't come to whatever part of London that we're in and take part in this event. So I think there's a complementary thing that can happen between the physical and online events. And I'm, really interested to see how they develop further. So Yeah, I think one of the last things that I wanted to touch on, speaking of the times we live in, a lot of kind of protests happening around the world, sort of the whole like Black Lives Matter thing, and not to sort of turn this into any kind of political discussion, but just off the back of that, we've seen a lot of responses from different industries, and the video games industry being one of them. And I saw, from the protest, that off the back of it, a lot of responses from companies launching different initiatives to help widen the diversity of intake into the game's making, so the making side of things. What did you all think about the response from the companies, and any particular initiative that was launched stand out to you? And I guess to a wider point, because I recently looked at in the UK, they did a video game census, and they looked at sort of a lot of the diversity statistics, and they weren't good, to be honest. So obviously there's still a lot that needs to be done. So yeah, what did you all think about the response from the video games industry, and what do you think needs to be done to improve the diversity in video games? I thought I'd end with a big, broad question on that. Yeah, how do we solve diversity and systematic racism in video games?
I think starting off with the response, I think that a lot of it was quite strong. A lot of I think that a lot of the statements that people made were pretty good on the whole. However, I think what sums it up best was Riot. One of the Riot executives recently left because he made quite a statement on George Floyd on his private Facebook, and immediately had to leave, or immediately was basically pushed out, or he retired suddenly, right?
Right.
And I think that's it really sums up a lot of the gaming sphere. There's a lot of words and people can put out initiatives, and I do believe that there are employees, or there's a whole section of the gaming sphere that really is pushing for like an end to systematic racism, and intelligently talking about games and how they can end toxicity and sort of that. But there are always going to be those few people that ruin it for everyone. I say always be. I hope that ends. Like, I sincerely do. But it's sort of a difficult position with gaming, because it's so new and it has some of the oldest issues really ingrained into the communities, and there's such anonymity within gaming when you're talking to someone over a mic, and you can tell that their accent may be from a place that you have a slur for example. That it gets really murky and really difficult, and it's really on a lot of games companies to really take action. But taking action can also mean that they get, they wade into waters they don't want to wade into,
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's good to see, I guess, a response and acknowledgement of what's happening, and particularly for video games, an acknowledgement of what is the lack of diversity in the people who make the games. And the way I kind of look at it, I feel, so for me, like games, you're telling stories, a different form of the stories. And if you have the same people telling the same stories, like that will quickly eventually run dry. Maybe not quickly, you can obviously go a few decades with that, but eventually it will run dry. And when you see people complaining about, we've seen this game and we've seen this type of character before and blah blah blah, I think a big reason of that is because you've got the same people making the same games. You've also got sort of the video games industry that kind of goes to less, the more money you're spending, the less risk you take, because you're appealing to the sort of the masses, and there's that issue. But in terms of the diversity, I think it is a positive thing to bring in new perspectives and new stories and new ways of using the mechanics to tell these stories in games. So I just hope that it's not a case of initiatives for the moment, and there are some real like long-term efforts made to bring sort of new people and make it to get people who, like, because I work with young people, and I talk to young people who are into like comics and games, and they're not even aware that you can have a career in games, like an actual career in games, or their parents are. So I feel there's a whole batch of people who are still, being left out, and a lot of them could have the next, idea for a franchise. So I think if gaming's like serious about increasing the diversity to make better games, because that's what we all want, they can kind of make this an actual sustained effort to just bring in new people. So I hope that's what happens.
Yeah, I think it would be nice if, as a business, they didn't look at bringing in anyone as a financial risk, and they look at it having a bigger pool of talent to source people from. And I talk to so many up and coming people in the indie comic book and the indie game development scenes, and there is a massive diversity in the indie scenes, and what they're making is really awesome. And one of the reasons I started gravitating a lot towards a lot of indie stuff was because it gave me suddenly this massively huge range of different types and styles of games. And the indie scene has been growing. We have entire events in London, like Resd and stuff, which is pretty much all just indie games, and those events are packed. So there is definitely the possibility, if you put those different perspectives, those different talents onto bigger titles and bigger things, and put them in front of more people, you'd find that actually, maybe we don't just need to be producing the same kind of games. Much as battle royale games are fun, you sort of started to see the same kind of things taking over a little bit with a lot of the AAA titles. And there's such an untapped pool of talent, and hopefully they'll, because they obviously think in dollar signs, hopefully they're going to start looking and saying, actually, we can do something that's not just good for the world, but it also might make us a ton of money, which is win-win.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, let's hope that that can happen. So I'm going to end on a quick, or end this segment on a quick take. And this is a question I was interested in, but also came in from, I'm going to try not to butcher this name, but Nabalim. Gina, did I get that right? I'm going to assume I got that right. On Instagram.
It's Nab Halim, I think. It's a mix of her first name and her last name.
Okay, there we go. See, I often butcher names. I just got to double check. But actually, this is a question of so I'm kind of merging questions here, but what are you most looking forward to in next gen? Is it a particular game, a franchise, or a feature? What are you most looking? We'll just go around the room, virtual room, starting with Imogen. What are you most looking forward to?
Probably just a variety of news stories. I think with a new gen comes a lot of new ideas. Developers thinking, I think the game that I dreamed of this many years ago is now possible. Let me give it a go. So yeah, I think just a variety of news stories, maybe some big advance in even with Unreal Engine 5, a lot of news stories, a lot of new indie developers coming in the game and showing off a little bit.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, Gary, what are you most looking forward to?
Well, two things. Like, first of all, I kind of want to see how far they can push the boundaries of like AI. So like, NPCs and characters in games and that sort of thing. Like, because I imagine like they can add a whole new layer of logic to games now, where characters are doing all kinds of like basically thinking for themselves, like, and acting more like real people instead of pre-programmed models or whatever. So I want to see like how far they push the limits with that, and also I want to see more VR stuff, and see if because I'm guessing Sony will have some PlayStation VR for the PS5, so
That's a good
I want
point.
to see if they take that to a next level.
Okay, yeah, they did mention that in the stream, so yeah, that would be interesting to see. Let me not forget Bex this time. What are you most looking forward to?
I was an early adopter of VR, and I love the idea of seeing what the new power that they're going to have available to them allows them to make with different immersive experiences and different ways of navigating games. And I think that for me is going to be the biggest kind of leap forward. That for me is kind of like when we went from pixels and 2D to suddenly having polygons and 3D. And for me, it's just been getting more and more complicated graphic wise and more beautiful, but it wasn't a massive leap until I got hold of an Oculus, and then I was inside the game and you start playing with like the art programs and stuff like that. So I think for me, what I'd like to see is more immersion and variety in the way we are interactive with the game environments.
Yeah, no, and I think I'd say along similar lines, I'm interested to see, so I touched on it earlier about the SSD and what that means for the design of games. I'm interested to see how the next generation of games take a leap forward, not just really, because I think to a certain point, and I'm willing to be proven wrong in like 50 years when it's indistinguishable from real life, but I think there's diminishing returns on just bumping up the graphics, and I'm interested to see how they can change the way we interact with games, whether it's VR, whether it's, it means no loading means you can just go to different worlds in an instant. I want to see non-graphical leap forward in the design of games and what that means for storytelling, because I'm always interested in that. Let us know what you think. As always, you can send us your feedback to feedback@mayamada.com. Are you PC, Xbox, PlayStation? Are you still rooting for Stadia? Let us know. If you're still rooting for Stadia, if you have a Stadia, let us know, just so we know you're out there.